It's another cemetery build, and this week we are going to add a gate to the entrance of our cemetery. I start out with these stick thingies I picked up from the dollar store. They're called skinny sticks and are about 5 3/4 inches long by, I think it's a 1/4 inch wide. I'm making my gate in a similar way to the way I made my fence sections. I start by marking out where I'm going to drill my holes in the rail, which will make room for the post. I mark out the holes and the center line for the holes. Then I stack the rails and drill holes in all three at the same time. Speeds things up a little bit, make sure that the holes are aligned. Thanks for the suggestion, Earthman Brick. I insert the individual skewers into the holes of the rails, keeping with the spacing from the previous video on fence sections so that the aesthetic is consistent. Once I have the gate sections framed, I paint them black to keep with the wrought iron look, again with the aesthetics. Trim off a little bit of the post at the bottom there and make sure it's even with the frame. And I just use hot glue to attach the sides to the gate. Then I paint it black. I went ahead and cut off the little end of the gates there to make sure it was flush and even at the bottom, and then painted over it. Here's a look at what the gate will look like once it's attached to the columns. Now I could attach them to where they don't open, but I want the gates on hinges so that they can open and close. I think that would be a lot of fun. So first I need a place on the column that is reinforced and will hold the gate. I'm going back to my stick thingies, which I measure out and cut 2 pieces that are the same length as the side of the gate. Using a Dremel and the 5/64 inch bit, I think it is, I drill in holes for where the pins for the hinges will go. Then I paint those side pieces black. I actually made 4 of them when I only needed 2. It's just a good idea to have backups because when you're trying something new, you never know what's going to go wrong. And you'll also see I went ahead and drilled holes in there for where I think that the hinges are going to go on column side. Now with that out of the way, I'm going to move over to making the second part of my hinges. So hinges come in two different parts. The one side of a hinge is called the leaf and knuckles, and the other part is the pins. So here the pins are going to be a 90-degree angle. I'm using 18 gauge wire. I'll put it into the fence post here. You'll see that's going to be the side of the gate that is attached to the column, with the pin coming out of the post there. And with that out of the way, I'm going to take that same 18 gauge wire and I'm going to hammer it flat. I have my little jeweler's anvil there, and using that and a hammer, I take it down to where it's flat. And then I use some needle nose pliers to make a little circle at the end of it, and that's what will go over the pin. Now, to figure out how much length I need, I just eyeballed it. I put it on the gate, gave it enough of a length so that I would be able to glue it onto the gate itself. And then here I am putting the column side, so I'm just gluing that post onto the column that holds those two little 90-degree angle pins. And then here you'll see I'm sliding the gate onto the column, checking the fitting. A few adjustments, making sure those pins are at 90-degree angles and that they are fitted correctly and pointing up. A little bit of hot glue to keep them in place. Now back to our gate, I'm going to go ahead and put those leaf and knuckle pieces onto the gate that will slide onto those pins. And I'm just using hot glue. Two of these per gate, top and bottom. Clean it up a little bit. Pull off those threads that you have when you're using hot glue, those little strings of hot glue that inevitably come with every hot glue usage. So I want to have a base for this, and I measure it out, making sure I have the correct distance, taking into account the width of the columns and the gates. And I'm just going to cut out a piece there. Make sure I'm covering here and just hot glue the columns onto the base. Again, making sure I got the fit right so that it's gonna all fit together at the end of the day. And there we go. I'm glued onto the base and I'm ready for the next part, which is a pretty easy and fun part. This is where I spread some Elmer's glue all across the base, and this is to prepare it for the basing material. For the basing material, I'll be using construction sand as I did with the fence sections I did in the previous video. Now back to our gate with these hinges. I want to paint them so everything looks consistent. Everything looks like it's wrought iron. So I start with some gray primer. I'm using Vallejo primer so that the paint will stick to it. And I do it both for the hinges that are, the piece of the hinges that are on the gates and on the columns. Get full coverage there so that the paint will stick. While I'm going to wait for that to dry, I go ahead and, since I started this a little bit later after I'd gotten the base on, all the construction sand had dried up. But I want to put a protective coat over top of it so it doesn't get knocked around or kicked off. So I use a 50% glue, Elmer's glue, and water combination. Basically watered down glue, and I paint it over the rocks on the base. Then I go back after the primer has dried, which doesn't take very long, and go ahead and paint over the hinges with some black miniature paints, again a Vallejo type paint. And then, yeah, we have our little gate that opens and closes. So let's see what this looks like with everything finished. And go ahead and put it onto our graveyard, our cemetery. And that concludes another episode of Tabletop That. Feel free to hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed the video. If you didn't, feel free to hit that thumbs down button. Leave comments below and hit that subscribe button if you're so inclined. And until next time, have fun and keep crafting.